Have you ever noticed how often religious stories urge people to wake up, while many of the loudest religious voices seem determined to stay spiritually and morally asleep? It's strange. These ancient stories call people to pay attention, to notice what's happening around them, and to live with intention. Yet so much of modern religious culture leans toward dogma, certainty, and shutting down curiosity rather than opening our eyes. Welcome to Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be taking a look at 3 readings from the Christian Bible through the lens of sacred myth. As we reflect on the readings for the first Sunday of Advent, we'll explore how these ancient passages challenge us to stop sleepwalking through life, to understand our values, and to imagine a future grounded in peace and integrity rather than fear or domination. In this episode, we're asking a tough question. What would our lives look like if we actually woke up? Not in the cultural war sense, but in the true human sense. What if we woke up and started paying attention to the world as it really is, and the world it could become? Because a lot of people shouting about being anti-woke sound like they're terrified of consciousness, responsibility, and growth. So grab a comfy seat, a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's look at some ancient stories together in this edition of Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be exploring the readings for the first Sunday of Advent, Cycle A of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. In this series, we're exploring the Bible through the lens of sacred myth, looking for interpretations and lessons that don't demand a belief in the supernatural. Now, what that means from a practical standpoint is that we will assume that these stories and writings are fiction, written by pre-scientific people with their own agendas and different audiences. Now, you might agree with the lessons I find, but I encourage you to look for something that rings true to you. Part of the beauty of understanding these writings as sacred myths is that we're free to interpret them for ourselves. We're free to learn the lessons that we need right now. So with that, let's dive in. As I said, tonight we'll be looking at the readings for the first Sunday of Advent, Cycle A. Our first reading is from Isaiah. It's chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Our second reading is from the letter to the Romans, chapter 13, verses 11 through 14. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. It's chapter 24, verses 37 through 44. Now, we'll start by going through all 3 of the readings, then we'll look for the messages and the main lesson in each one. Finally, we'll bring everything together, look at what it means for us today, and talk about where we go from here. And with that, let's begin. Our first reading is from the prophet Isaiah. This is what Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths." The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war any more. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Our second reading is from Paul's letter to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, do this, understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us behave decently, as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and jealousy. Rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ, and do not think about how to gratify the desires of the flesh. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill. One will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him." All right, so let's go back and take a critical look at these readings and see what learnings and lessons we can find if we dig around just a little bit. So our first reading was from Isaiah. And this reading paints a beautiful, almost utopian picture. A world where people voluntarily seek wisdom. They choose cooperation over domination. They reshape instruments of violence into tools that actually help humanity grow. For an oppressed people living in exile, that vision wasn't just poetry. It was probably survival. It was a way of imagining a future that was worth striving toward. Instead of giving them a blueprint for conquest, Isaiah offered hope that was rooted in unity, fairness, and a shared sense of responsibility. It's a vision that invites people to walk toward peace by transforming themselves and their communities, not by forcing others into submission. But when we look around today, especially at the loudest and most powerful Christian voices in the United States, the contrast is appalling. Instead of embracing Isaiah's vision of people freely choosing a path of mutual respect, many of today's most powerful and influential Christians have adopted a worldview that's centered on domination, controlling culture, law, education, media, and government. The so-called 7 Mountains Mandate isn't about peace. It's about hierarchy. It's about turning faith into a political weapon and claiming God's authority to override the rights and the dignity of anyone who doesn't conform. That's not what Isaiah imagined, and it certainly isn't what peace looks like. It's a distortion of the whole purpose of this prophecy. And then there's the bigger issue. The world Isaiah described hasn't materialized, not even close. With modern borders, surveillance, military power, and governments intent on protecting their own interests at all costs, we are arguably further from that peaceful vision today than ancient Israel ever was. The Abrahamic religions, which trace their roots to a shared spiritual lineage, now too often operate as competitors instead of peaceful collaborators. Instead of turning swords into plowshares, they're all building bigger weapons. Instead of seeking understanding, they're clinging to nationalism, isolationism, and their claims of superiority. The tragic irony is that many believers claim they're fighting for peace, when what they really want is control. And that's the opposite of what Isaiah describes. So the main lesson I got from our first reading is that We need a healthier vision of peace on earth. If Isaiah's vision is going to mean anything today, we need to reinterpret it in a healthier, more human way. Peace isn't going to be imposed from above, and it certainly won't be achieved through religious dominance or political coercion. Real peace grows when people prioritize things like cooperation, fairness, curiosity, compassion. When we stop trying to win and start trying to understand, that's a vision worth holding on to. That's a vision worth working toward. We need a healthier vision of peace on earth. Our second reading was from the letter to the Romans, and Paul wrote this passage expecting the world to end in his lifetime. He truly believed Jesus was coming back any minute now, and that sense of urgency shaped virtually everything he taught. But even without the apocalyptic framework here, there's something useful buried in this message. When Paul says, "Our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed," we can understand it in a very human way. Each day brings us closer to the end of our lives. And for those of us who don't believe in an afterlife, this isn't frightening. If anything, it's clarifying. It reminds us that our time is limited and that we should live intentionally instead of just drifting through our days on autopilot. Paul's call to wake up from your slumber is actually a powerful secular metaphor. Modern life is full of distractions. Screens, stress, noise, politics, deadlines. It's so easy to go numb and just stop paying attention to who we're becoming. And when Paul says to put on the armor of light or clothe yourselves with Christ, he's using poetic language to urge his readers to adopt a healthier way of life. Strip away that supernatural framing, and this is about aligning your daily habits, your thoughts, your words, your actions, aligning them around solid core values like compassion, fairness, integrity, and cooperation. When we build our lives around those values, we are stronger, steadier, and so much more capable of handling whatever life throws at us. But here's where things go off the rails today. Many Christian nationalists and evangelicals have reinterpreted this armor of light language as fuel for cultural warfare. Instead of seeing it as a call to personal transformation, which is what Paul meant it as, they use it to justify attacking people they deem immoral or unrighteous or sinful. It becomes a rallying cry for domination of others, not for self-reflection. This isn't what Paul meant, and it isn't healthy. They've lost the plot by turning a metaphor for inner growth into a weapon for political control. The real work isn't about fighting outsiders. It's about becoming better humans on the inside. Anyway, the main lesson I got from our second reading is that our thoughts, words, and actions should align with good core values. So the real takeaway from this reading isn't about preparing for a supernatural event or gearing up for a cultural war. It's an invitation to live awake, to stop drifting, to stop numbing ourselves, and to start aligning our daily lives with values that actually make the world better for everyone. When our words, our choices, our actions reflect compassion, fairness, and integrity, we live more fully and contribute more meaningfully. Our thoughts, words, and actions should align with good core values. Okay, our final reading was from the Gospel of Matthew. And this gospel uses some unsettling imagery. Right? People suddenly separated, ordinary life interrupted, a dramatic shift that nobody sees coming. The point, at least in the story, really is to just jolt people awake. Jesus tells his followers that life can change instantly, so they should always be ready. So, again, once we strip away the supernatural framing, the message becomes far more universal. Life is unpredictable, and none of us knows how much time we have. That's not meant to scare us. It's meant to motivate us. It's a reminder that drifting through our days half asleep, well, that isn't living. Being morally and emotionally alert, though, it can be hard because we still have responsibilities, routines, and so many different stressors. We're doing dishes, we're answering emails, paying bills, shuttling kids to and from activities, just like the people in this story who were milling grain or working in their fields. And this is where the humanistic meaning really stands out. Readiness isn't about waiting for a supernatural intervention. Readiness is about getting clear on who we want to be and then aligning our daily habits with that clarity. When we take time to understand our core values, things like fairness, empathy, curiosity, integrity, cooperation, we're better equipped to make decisions that actually reflect our best selves. Some Christians read this passage as a warning that only a chosen few will be saved. But that interpretation misses the simple, grounded truth that's embedded in the metaphor. Just like the characters in the story, we go through our ordinary routines without realizing how quickly life can change. Illness, accidents, job losses, opportunities, relationships. So much of life happens just without warning. We can't control the unpredictability of life, but we can control how intentionally we live it. Instead of waiting for the next life, we can choose to be fully present in this one. So the main lesson I got from our gospel reading is that we should start living our best life right now. The real challenge in this reading is not to fear judgment or prepare for a cosmic event. It's to stop wasting the only life we know for sure that we have. Our challenge is to wake up, get clear about what matters, and start living with purpose, compassion, and integrity today, not someday. Life is short, unpredictable, and precious, which is exactly why we should start living our best life right now. All right, let's review the lessons we've talked about so far. In our first reading from Isaiah, the main lesson I came away with was we need a healthier vision of peace on earth. In our second reading from Romans, the main lesson I got was our thoughts, words, and actions should align with good core values. And finally, the main lesson I got from our gospel reading was we should start living our best life right now. Together, these lessons give us a pretty simple but powerful challenge. It's time to wake up. Not in a fearful end times kind of way, but in the sense of paying attention to the world as it actually is and to the world we're capable of building. Isaiah gives us a vision of peace that's worth striving for. Paul reminds us that life is short and we can't sleepwalk through it, and the gospel pushes us to act before we find ourselves out of time. Waking up means noticing what matters, getting honest about our values, and aligning our daily choices with the kind of life and the kind of future we actually want. Because when we live intentionally, with clarity, compassion, courage. We don't just respond to the world, we help shape it. So let's step back and take another look at these readings overall and see if we can figure out what these lessons really mean to us in our daily lives. To do this, I'll try to answer two questions. So what? And now what? Okay, so what? Why should we care about any of this? Well, we should care about this because a lot of the loudest religious voices in our country aren't actually awake in the way these scriptures call for. They're not paying attention to the real world or to the impact of their actions. They're locked into dogma, culture war talking points, and this need to dominate anyone who disagrees with them. They use religion as a shield for their bigotry, instead of using it as a guide for living responsibly in a complicated world. And when large groups of people choose unconsciousness over awareness, the rest of us feel the consequences. This is important because the whole anti-woke crusade is basically an attempt to shame people for being alert, informed, and aware of injustice. The original meaning of woke came from black communities warning one another to stay conscious of the forces shaping their lives. Being woke meant being vigilant and aware. Conservatives have twisted it into an insult because they benefit when people stay asleep. But the scriptures they quote so aggressively actually call people to wake up, to be conscious, to pay attention, to be woke. And if we let these conservatives turn awareness into something shameful, we're giving up one of the most important tools we have for building a better world. We should care about this because waking up isn't just about noticing what's wrong out there. It's also about noticing what's going on inside of us, especially when it comes to our values. You can't live your best life by following whatever values someone handed to you, especially when those values don't stand on their own merit, when they can only be called values because they claim to come from some unprovable divine source. Some people value dominance, exclusion, or punishing others for not believing what they believe. Those aren't real values. They don't promote human thriving, they don't lead to good outcomes, and they certainly don't build healthy communities. Real values, values that actually matter, are the ones that line up with how human beings flourish. Compassion, fairness, cooperation, integrity, and curiosity. This is important because you can only figure out whether your values are truly good if you're truly awake. You have to be conscious of where those beliefs came from, whether they were taught to you or chosen by you, and whether they help you live a life you're proud of. When you take the time to wake up, look inward, and align your words and actions with values that actually benefit real people, you don't just live more intentionally, you live more fully. You stop sleepwalking through life and you start shaping it. And that's the whole point of waking up in the first place. All right, the last question I try to answer is, now what? What are we supposed to do? Where do we go from here? Well, sometimes the hardest part of waking up is realizing where we're still drifting. It's easy to call out the ways other people sleepwalk through life, but it takes real honesty to notice the places where we might be tuning out, going through the motions, or accepting beliefs and habits that we've never actually examined. That's the kind of awareness that leads to real growth. So, with that in mind, here's your question for the week. Where in your life are you operating on autopilot? And what would change if you approached that area with more awareness, intention, and honesty? Reflecting on this matters because it helps you identify the parts of your life where you're not fully present, where old patterns or unexamined values might be steering the wheel. When you slow down and ask yourself why you think a certain way or why you react the way you do to certain things, you start to uncover what actually drives your choices. When I was in high school and the first couple years of college, so we're talking roughly 1982 to 1987, I had no close friends who were openly gay. At least I didn't think I did. Back then, it was common to hear Christians refer to AIDS as the gay plague. And the Catholic Church left no room for nuance. And homosexuality was labeled a sin. End of discussion. And I'll be honest, as a teenager and young adult, I didn't understand same-sex attraction at all. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea of two guys kissing, let alone gay sex. It wasn't part of my world, so it didn't make sense to me. And because it didn't make sense, I never questioned the teachings I'd grown up with. I laughed along with the jokes from comedians like Sam Kinison and Eddie Murphy and had a whole repertoire of gay jokes of my own ready to go whenever an opportunity popped up. Most of the time, they got a good laugh, but not always. At one point, a friend of mine, someone I really trusted, pulled me aside and told me, gently but firmly, that a couple of the guys in our group were gay. And they weren't laughing. They were hurt. Really hurt. My first instinct was defensive and dismissive. Right? Well, tough shit. That's their problem if they've got some perverted same-sex attraction thing going on. Thankfully, I didn't say that out loud, but the thought flashed through my mind, shaped by the beliefs I had absorbed without ever examining them. And then, thankfully, the more reasonable part of my brain stepped in. It said, hold on, sport. These are good people. They're kind. They're loyal. They'd help anyone in a heartbeat. Are you really sure you understand this well enough to just write them off? That moment landed harder than I expected. Now, it wasn't some Hollywood-style epiphany where, everything suddenly made sense to me. It was a hell of a lot messier than that. I spent a lot of time reflecting, trying to understand where my feelings and assumptions actually came from. Was I really so confident in my beliefs? Or had I simply never questioned the things I'd been taught by my religion? I realized that I didn't have to fully understand something in order to treat people with dignity. I didn't have to solve the entire puzzle of human sexuality to stop being cruel, to stop being an asshole. I couldn't flip a switch in my head and instantly change my thoughts, but I could change my behavior. I could choose kindness. I could choose respect. I could choose to stop making jokes that hurt people, even if part of me was still wrestling with the confusion. And here's the interesting thing. Once I started acting differently, intentionally choosing acceptance, cooperation, and empathy, my thoughts slowly shifted too. The values I genuinely cared about eventually caught up to the behavior I had committed to, and that conscious choice changed the course of my life in countless positive ways. It deepened friendships, it pushed me to question other unexamined beliefs, and it taught me that waking up isn't always a lightning bolt. It's often a slow, steady decision to stay aware, stay curious, and stay compassionate, even when you don't fully understand everything yet. And from there, you can make simple but meaningful adjustments, right? You can set a boundary, you can change a routine, you can rethink a belief, or simply pay attention instead of drifting. So this kind of awareness doesn't just make you more effective in your day-to-day life. It helps you live more intentionally, with less regret and more clarity about who you want to be. So spend some quality time with our question this week. Where in your life are you operating on autopilot? And what would change if you approached that area with more awareness, intention, and honesty? Well, before I wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with one more thought. Leonardo da Vinci once said, "The greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions." I think this speaks directly to the heart of the question we're asking this week. Da Vinci wasn't warning people about being deceived by others. He was warning us about being deceived by ourselves. That's what happens when we operate on autopilot, hold opinions we've never examined, or mistake inherited beliefs for truth. It's incredibly easy to accept our assumptions as fact simply because they feel familiar or comfortable. That's why the question, where am I living on autopilot, matters so much. When we pause long enough to ask where our beliefs came from or why we react the way we do, we open the door to growth. We give ourselves the chance to wake up, to notice what's actually happening inside of us, and to choose values that reflect who we truly want to be. Da Vinci understood that unexamined opinions quietly shape our lives. Our job is to make sure they're shaping us in the right direction. All right, we've come to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next week. But in the meantime, I encourage you to engage with our question for the week and pay attention to the important lessons you come across, wherever you find them. You'll create a more purposeful and joyful life, and you'll start to feel more connected to the world and the people around you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mythologizing the Bible as we did a deeper dive into the readings for the first Sunday of Advent, Cycle A of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. Remember that when we live intentionally, with clarity, compassion, and courage, we don't just respond to the world, we help shape it. The Bible readings used for this episode are from the Holy Bible, New International Version, NIV, copyright 1973, 1978, 1984, 2011 by Biblica Inc., used by permission, all rights reserved, worldwide. Thank you for listening. If you like this content, please consider telling a friend about it. The more people who hear the positive messages I'm sharing, the better. Mythologizing the Bible is a live-streamed series held most Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/The Project. Every week, the audio of these Mythologizing the Bible presentations is released as a podcast. You can find the podcast at thecodaproject.com or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Pocket Casts. To learn more, to subscribe to my mailing list, to keep up on everything I'm doing with the Coda Project, please visit thecodaproject.com.